Welcome, everybody, to Mom Street USA. My name is Jackie, aka Wishes Mama. And today on Mom Street, we are going to be discussing rainy Disney days and what to do if the weather is not cooperating and you have a Disney trip coming up. So, I'm going to do my best today to give you some advice and some tips, some experiences that I've had, and hopefully get you prepared for if you do end up at Disney World or Disneyland during the rainy season, what that looks like and what you can expect. So, the goal today is to talk about what to pack in your suitcase, what to put in your park bag, where in the parks you can go if it is raining and you need a place to hide from the rain, and then also talking about what to do and what to remember after your rainy Disney day is over, just some tips and tricks and things like that. So that is on the list for today. So we're going to go ahead and just hop in and chat about rain at Disney. So some times of year at Disney, Disney and rain go hand in hand, right? Especially if you're visiting Florida. Disneyland doesn't have quite as drastic of an issue with rain as Disney World does, right? But this episode aims to help you better prepare for rain while on your vacation to the Disney parks. My goal is, again, to highlight different things to help you before, during, and after. So let's take a look, starting with what to pack in your suitcase. So we've done some episodes here on Mom Street about different ideas of what to pack and what you need to make sure you get ahead of time, things to prepare for weather. So just reminders for a lot of this because we have talked about a lot of this before. But before you even leave for your trip, you've got to check the weather, which is kind of a given, right? But I would also be sure you're checking it kind of daily in the 3, 4, 5 days leading up, depending on when you start your packing. You're going to want to start to check that daily because things can change drastically, especially when it comes to Florida weather. If you're visiting during any sort of storm season, hurricane season, tropical storms, or if you're visiting Disneyland during some of those kind of record-breaking wet seasons that they've had in years past. So, if you're going to Disneyland, the rainy season tends to be in the winter months. So December, January, February is kind of when you're looking at their rainy season. So completely opposite of when we see it in Florida, right? Just a fun fact per Google, on average in Anaheim, which again, Disneyland, we're talking, it rains about 34 days each year. So very, very minimal in comparison to that. But you've got to still be prepared because that's the average. It could be more, it could be less. You never know. Now, the rainy season in Disney World typically runs from April to about September. Now, that doesn't mean that's the only time that it's going to be rainy, right? But that is when you will see those warmer months that tend to have more rainstorms come through in Florida. On average, it rains about 148 days each year in Orlando. So that is a good portion of their year, nearly half, right? That you're going to have rainy days in Orlando when you're visiting. So, again, those warmer months have those pop up afternoon rain showers, and they can happen anywhere from about 1 p.m. until about 5 p.m., depending on all sorts of factors, but a lot of the time depending on heat and humidity. So you'll be able to look at that. So sometimes when you're looking at that app that you're using to check weather, it can be a little tricky, especially for Walt Disney World. For example, my last trip that I took with my family, we went over Memorial Day, which is in that rainy season. We knew it was likely to rain in the afternoons, and we were looking at the percentages of rain on the, extended forecast, and it was like 35 to 40 maybe percent. So in my head, I kind of said, oh, okay, those are going to be those afternoon pop-up rain showers. That's no problem. We'll just plan accordingly and make sure that we, take shelter ahead of time or take a trip back to the resort to relax in the room for a little bit while it's raining. We'll have a plan set in motion. Well, our trip over Memorial Day ended up being the rainiest trip that I have ever taken to Disney in the decade plus that I have been visiting the parks. So we had rain in the mornings. First thing, we had rain at around 6, 7 p.m. at dinner time. So you never truly know Florida rain especially can be fairly unpredictable. So you really want to keep checking the closer you get to your trip in case you need to pivot and pick some different clothing options or, uh, you know, pivot a little bit from what it might be that you're planning. So let's talk about what to pack to help prepare you for if you do see rain in the forecast. And these kind of go for both coasts, right? This is kind of a universal topic, not universal the park, but for both sides of the country when it comes to that. So a couple things to make sure that you've got packed in your suitcase if you're anticipating any sort of rain. Poncho, umbrella, rain jacket. Those are all kind of givens when it comes to rain. But making sure that every person in your party has some sort of plan when it comes to rain. I highly suggest for little kids doing like a really nice rain jacket. Chances are good they probably already have one, especially if you're someone that lives in a more rainy climate where you are. But I really suggest having a nice rain jacket for them. Ponchos can be a little bit too much for some little kiddos, especially if they're toddlers, right? Not only are they uncomfy and you kind of have to just tough it out, but they don't make really great like toddler kid sized ones. So they're gonna be big if they're new walkers and they want to walk and splash in the puddles. A poncho is gonna be really tricky to navigate. Even my 6 and 8 year olds, when we did them last trip, had a hard time like, where does my head go? Where do my arms go? Right? It's a very foreign experience. So I don't highly suggest ponchos for kids. I would rather see something like a rain jacket, but for the adults in your group, ponchos may be fine. Uh, be sure to have a plan for storing whatever your rain gear is after they get wet. So if that's a bag for your umbrella to go in after you're done with it, if that's a bag for your poncho to be able to go in, then that is an option as well. You need to have some sort of plan for after they're wet when it's no longer raining, right? You want to make sure that you can put those away and have them not get everything else in your park bag wet. So, whether that's the bottom of your stroller, that's what we tend to do because we still have a stroller when we go to the parks. We just designate that bottom storage area to throw our wet stuff in the meantime while we're still running around the parks. Or if that's an extra bag, they make, mesh wet bags that you can get for like bathing suits and stuff. Those would be a great option, but have some sort of a plan. Just a note for the whole poncho versus rain jacket thing. I was chatting with our good friend Kate, the Disney Cicerone, former co-host of Mom Street, about this topic this week. And she mentioned to me that there's just a funny kind of culture thing that Disneyland tends to see less ponchos and more rain jackets. So she noted that she thought it was funny because when she is in Disneyland and she sees a poncho, she knows that that's likely a Walt Disney World transplant family that is visiting the West Coast part. So again, just kind of differences with that. You're going to see more umbrellas and rain jackets in Disneyland, whereas Disney World tends to be more ponchos, but they also do get some umbrellas there as well. Something else to consider packing when it comes to prepping for the rain and for the weather at Disney is shoes that can withstand the rain. You want to make sure that whatever shoes you have packed are going to be good in the rain, are going to dry quickly, are going to hold up, right? And not get really sloshy, not take on a ton of water. So you really need to consider that and think about when you're getting dressed each morning whether or not that shoe is a good choice for the weather forecast for the day. If you don't have shoes that are really good options for rain, then investing in something like a shoe cover is also a really great idea. So, the way that these shoe covers typically work is they look like little ponchos for your shoes. The bottom has like a sole on it, and then it either zips or like cinches up and it covers your whole shoe. So you can wear those in place of having like a water resistant or waterproof shoe if you're like, I don't want to go buy new shoes for my Disney trip. I really like my tennis shoes I already have. Maybe a shoe cover is a better option for you. But do keep in mind you want to have something that completely comes up your ankle, and gives you a little bit more height on it because, especially in Disney World, there are several pathways that are prone to flooding. Because the rain comes down so hard and so fast during that time, then you may be stuck having to kind of wade through some rivers of rainwater in the parks. So just keep that in mind. You want to make sure that you've got enough coverage kind of up your ankle to be sure that your feet are not going to get soaked when you're walking through the parks. Something else to consider is making sure that you pack multiple pairs of shoes. So that way, if your shoes do get soaked in an unexpected rain shower, they have time to dry so that way and you still have another pair of shoes to wear, right? 2 pairs of tennis shoes or 2 pairs of park shoes minimum for every Disney trip that you take because your shoes need to have time to dry in between if they're ones that are going to get wet. So, making sure that you have those and those are available for you to swap out if you're coming back in the middle of the day to get, dry, clean, socks and shoes on, making sure that you have another pair that you can swap out. Something else to consider when it comes to, covering when it comes to the rain, stroller covers. You've gotta have some sort of a rain cover. Be sure in Disney World that you have that stroller cover because you want to make sure that your stroller does not end up soaking wet and your kiddos don't end up really sad because they have to sit in a wet seat on their stroller. So be sure to use it. Have one with you. I would pack it even if the chance of rain is really, really small. Pack it with you, make sure you have it. And if it's questionable, if you're getting ready to go into a show or a dining reservation and you're looking at the weather or looking at the sky and you're going, oh, I'm not really sure, just put it on. Just put it on. I cannot tell you at least 3 or 4 times a couple trips ago, we got caught without our stroller cover on, and it poured on our stroller, and we were soaking wet, and we had to figure out something to get it at least a little bit dry before my kids were wanting to sit on it. So just use it. Be sure that you have one with you. Be sure that you are taking a look at the weather before you're going into some of those extended indoor activities to make sure that you don't get stuck with a wet stroller. The last thing when you're looking at what to pack for the rain is just contemplate your wardrobe choices, okay? You don't want to be caught wearing clothes that become very translucent when they're wet or are going to be very heavy if they get wet. You want to make sure that you are really thinking about that for you, but also for your kids to make sure that whatever they're wearing will be comfortable in the rain. If it's going to rain, I would not put your little girl in one of those big princess puffy dresses, even though they may love it and that may be their favorite thing in the world. If it's going to rain, that dress is going to gain about 15 extra pounds, right? So you just want to make sure that you're thinking about that and thinking about picking out quick drying material that is going to be beneficial for rain showers. So if you do get wet, they will have more of a quick drying ability and you won't be stuck wearing drippy, soppy clothes for the rest of your park day. So that is kind of in a nutshell what to think about before your trip and what to pack. But let's talk about on your actual park day, what are good things that you can put in your park bag. So a couple things to consider, and we've gone through and I've done a whole episode on what I like to pack in my park bag. So scroll back in our archives a little bit to find my What's in Your Disney Park Bag episode. But things that are weather specific to pack. Again, we talked about poncho, rain jacket, umbrella, whatever of those you're doing, or if you've got a combination of them, be sure they're in your park bag, right? It doesn't do you any good if you're bringing them to the parks and then not taking them into the parks with you. Do keep in mind that if you've got an umbrella, that is something that will likely set off Disney's security. So your best bet is to hold it with 2 hands straight out in front of you when you go through the metal detectors. So be sure that you are thinking about that whenever you're getting ready to go through security. But being sure that those are all in your bag and making sure that every member of your parties is accounted for. So whether it's they're all together in one bag, like we've got 4 people in our family. So all 4 of our ponchos lived in my husband's backpack for the whole week that we were there last trip. Something else to consider is extra pairs of socks in your park bags because you may be in a situation where your shoes have dried or mostly dried, but your socks are still sopping wet, right? So, walking around the Disney parks, having wet socks and wet shoes, wet feet, not a great way to spend your Disney day if it can be avoided, right? So being sure that you have an extra pair of socks and again, having somewhere where wet socks can live in your bag that won't get everything else wet. I always suggest just grabbing a couple Ziplocs to have them in your bag or having some sort of designated wet clothes bag in your park bags that you're taking in or in the bottom of the stroller, having a place for those to go. Speaking of Ziplocs, another good thing to have in your park bag, if it's gonna rain, are Ziplocs, primarily for those wet clothes aftermath, but also for if it's gonna pour, throw your electronic devices in a Ziploc and just be safe. The worst is when your phone gets wet and it won't charge, or the speaker sounds funny and you can't listen to things if you want to be watching or listening to things while you're waiting in queues for different attractions. So, grabbing a Ziploc bag, grabbing a couple. I typically just throw like one small one and one big one in our bag, and we just have them in there for whatever we need. So definitely being sure that you have those available for you. And also remembering to bring your stroller cover. We just keep ours in the bottom of our stroller. Anything else we have that needs to go into that bottom storage area just gets piled on top. But that way it's accessible if we just like reach in the side uh of our storage area under our stroller when we need it. We just reach in, grab it out, and throw it on. That way, we're good to go with that. So those are kind of my you need to have this in your park bag when it comes to weather and rain at the Disney parks. The next thing we're going to talk about is where to go and what to do if you're in the parks and it's going to be raining. So if you are visiting and you're already in the parks and it starts to rain and you were not expecting it or you were expecting it, but you still need somewhere to go, let's talk about what to do in that situation. So here's the thing about visiting the Disney parks in the rain. There will be a large split on rides that close and rides that stay open. So you need to kind of plan accordingly to what area you're going to try to visit and go to if it does look like it's going to start to rain or starts to rain. So anything with an outdoor track will likely close. Now, keep in mind, I'm talking rain only. Okay. Things like thunder, wind, lightning, that is a kind of a different story. So I'm talking like straight up just rain, not massive storms or lightning, anything like that. But most stuff with outdoor tracks will close in the rain unless it's just like a little sprinkle. But if it's raining good, they're going to close. Um, any character meet and greet or attraction experience that has uncovered or exposed areas is going to close in the rain. So any character meet and greet that does not have an overhang that it hangs out underneath, or like a building that it's in, those are going to close. So like some of the pop-up characters you get at like Epcot, I'm thinking of those are going to close. Any of the roaming characters you see a lot in like Fantasyland at Disneyland, those characters are all going to go back to their backstage areas when it's raining, just because of the weather. So keep that in mind, especially if you're planning out rides for an afternoon where you know it's going to rain. Maybe avoid those outdoor ones and hit those either in the morning or the evening or another time when it's not going to be raining outside. Something else to consider is attempting to plan dining or rest breaks at your resort during known rainy times. So I mentioned that a little bit earlier, that if I know it's going to rain at 2 p.m., then I'm just going to plan to be back in my room, right? That's a great time to take a break anyway because it's likely hot, especially if you're visiting Disney World. Disneyland is a little bit different, but chances are good you can just walk back to your resort if you're staying near property at Disneyland. But using an afternoon break or using a rainy time break to go back to the room, recharge, reset a little bit, and not have to worry about getting soaking wet is a really great idea as well. And can definitely be a huge help, again, mostly at Disney World. So let's talk about in parks, specific places that I suggest you could take a look at to consider where to go when you're considering where to go to get out of the rain. So at Disneyland, we're going to start West Coast and move our way east here. So Disneyland, a couple places that you can go that would help you get out of the rain would be the Fantasy Fair and Royal Hall area, any of those shows. So, Tiki Room, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, the Main Street Cinema, the Disney Gallery with the new Walt animatronic show. Those are all really great options that you could pop into one of those shows to help get out of the rain for a little bit. Doing the castle walkthrough is a good option. Do keep in mind that if you're doing something like the castle walkthrough, you can't just like stand in the middle of the walkway, right? You have to actually physically do the walkthrough so that it doesn't become a hazard to other guests. So it's not a place where you can just go and hide, but if you want to go actually do the walkthrough, it's a great option as well. And then any indoor rides. Now you're going to hear me say this at all of these parks because all of these parks have rides that are indoors and or have ride queues that are also covered or indoors. So at Disneyland, things like the Jungle Cruise, Space Mountain, the Indiana Jones ride, they have indoor spaces that you can stand in a line and not get drenched while you're doing that. Not every ride has a covered or indoor queue. So you're going to need to scope out the area that you're in to be sure that you don't accidentally try to go to a ride that has an outdoor exposed queue that you're going to get drenched while you're waiting for that ride. Now, over in Disney's California Adventure, a couple places that you can go. The Animation Academy would be a great option over there. If you've got littles, doing the Disney Junior Dance Party is a good option to get indoors. PhilharMagic, the show, is a great option. Again, shows are good. And again, indoor ride queues. A lot of the rides over there do have some indoor and covered spaces for their attractions as well. Now, all of that being said, please keep in mind that if you are at any of these places, again, you cannot block exits, you cannot block entrances. You have to follow the norms of the flow of the queue or the crowds, things like that. So just keep that in mind. Cast members during the rain are unfortunately constantly telling people that they can't stand in doorways because it does become a hazard. So make a safe choice and go somewhere safe whenever it is raining for sure. And that again applies to all of these parks. Now, going over to Disney World, let's talk about what that looks like for a couple places that you can go. Starting with Magic Kingdom. Magic Kingdom has quite a few shows that you could consider hiding out in if it's going to be raining. Carousel of Progress, Country Bears, PhilharMagic, Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor, Hall of Presidents. All of those are options that you could consider. Hall of Presidents also has like a lobby area that's got some like museum memorabilia and stuff like that that you could wander in and take a look around without actually doing the show and still be out of the way. Again, making sure you're not blocking any exits, entrances, those types of things. Princess Fairy Tale Hall, Meeting the Princesses, is a good option because that queue is inside, or if it's not inside and it has spilled to the outside queue, it's still covered. So that is a great option as well. And again, any other attraction that has a covered queue, things like Small World, Peter Pan, Pooh Bear's queue is mostly covered to an extent. Things like that. The teacups are fairly well covered. Dumbo is covered. So a lot of Magic Kingdom attractions do have a covered queue, but you've got to be careful for things like the Tomorrowland Speedway. That queue is covered for a little bit of it, but then once you get closer up to the front, it's no longer covered. Now, that attraction typically won't run in the rain because of the exposed track that's outdoors. But things like that, you've just got to kind of take a mental note of and be weary of as you're walking through the parks. But any other attraction that has a covered queue area is always a great option. Another note about Magic Kingdom in the rain. It can be really frustrating when the rain ruins plans, right? If it's ruining, like, if you wanna go see Festival of Fantasy, the parade that is at Magic Kingdom during the day, it doesn't run in the rain. However, the nice thing about Festival of Fantasy that kind of is different than like a fireworks show or any of those other experiences is they will often do, if it gets canceled, they'll do what they call a rainy day cavalcade. And it is super cute. The cast members wear these adorable bright yellow raincoats with red hats and red boots. And the characters, a ton of the characters that would typically be in the parade will still appear in the rainy day cavalcade, and they will ride in the covered buses and Main Street vehicles. So that way they can still come through that pathway and wave to everybody and still have a little bit of a parade go on. So I think the rainy day cavalcade is super cute. Granted, it's not the big floats of Festival of Fantasy, but it's still a fun way and a unique way to see characters that not a lot of people get to see. So don't be too bummed if that's what happens, because Disney will do its best to make it up. If they just have to delay, they might just delay. For weather, it just really depends on the situation and the circumstances for that. Let's talk about Epcot. If you are in Epcot, it is the best park, in my opinion, to be in when it is raining outside, because really the only attraction in Epcot that routinely closes due to weather is Test Track because it does have that outdoor part of the track at the end. So that makes Epcot, again, an amazing park to visit in the rain. Again, just beware of outside and uncovered queues. The queue for Frozen Ever After is uncovered and exposed once it gets outside the building. The queue for Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, they have some umbrellas. Those umbrellas are made for shade. They're not made to keep the rain off. So just be aware of those types of things. The queue for Remy's Ratatouille Adventure is mostly covered. So you just, again, have to kind of look and see about a lot of these queue lines to see whether or not they're covered to determine if it's a good option for you to be able to visit during the weather. The Shops of World Showcase are a fabulous place to wander when it's raining outside, and you will find a lot of people that also tend to do that too. The good news is there's a ton of them, and you can kind of meander and wander and look around until you find places that are not super packed. But you do need to be prepared to jump from country to country out in the elements. So still having an umbrella or a poncho readily available is a good idea, regardless of if you are spending the majority of your time inside of those shops. So again, Epcot is a great, great park to visit if it is going to be raining just for that alone. Let's talk about Hollywood Studios. Hollywood Studios has a bunch of shows, which can be helpful. You've heard me talk about shows at some of the other parks. So Hollywood Studios has shows, but do keep in mind that sometimes the shows will close due to weather. The Indiana Jones show will close due to weather, and sometimes the Beauty and the Beast show will close due to weather, depending on how hard the wind is blowing and if they're at risk of the stage getting wet. We got to keep everybody safe that is performing in these shows. But the inside shows, Little Mermaid, the new Little Mermaid, the new Villains show, Frozen, the Frozen sing along. Those shows have really great indoor spaces that you're able to wait in. Again, pay attention to the queues. The Villains queue is outside. The Frozen Ever After queue is outside. Both of those are uncovered, and you could definitely get wet. The majority of the Little Mermaid queue is covered, but if it gets long enough, it does go to an outside exposed area. So just keeping in mind that when you're looking at the shows. Most of the rides at Hollywood Studios will still run in the rain. Slinky Dog will close because it is an outdoor roller coaster. So that one will close in the rain. And sometimes you will also see Alien Swirling Saucers close in the rain just because of the nature of that attraction. If it gets windy at all and that rain starts blowing underneath the awning where that attraction is, it just becomes a safety issue. So those two are really the only ones that you will find. Toy Story Mania is a great one because again, their whole outdoor queue has an awning that covers it, and then a lot of their queue is indoor. So that's a really great one. The queue for Rise of the Resistance, a little skeptical on that one. Same for like Tower of Terror. Those are outdoor queues that you will likely get wet if it starts to rain when you're waiting in those queues. So you have to kind of ballpark it, take a look and see what you think. But generally speaking, Hollywood Studios has some options there as well. And last but certainly not least, Animal Kingdom. Most of the rides, again, at Animal Kingdom will stay open. Cali River Rapids does tend to close for weather because it is an outdoor ride and it is a water ride. So, got to keep everyone safe when it comes to storms and rain. The safari can actually be really fun in the rain. So, my family, on our one morning we had at Animal Kingdom on our last trip around Memorial Day, we were there on a rainy morning. We were like, well, let's go on the safari and see what we can see. We saw so many animals. I think the rain helped cool it down. So the animals were a lot more active than we had anticipated. So it can be a really unique experience to see and experience that safari during the rain. Again, not during lightning and thunder and storms, but during rain, it can be a really fun experience. And same thing here that I talked about at the other parks, being aware of those outdoor cues. Unfortunately, things like Flight of Passage and Navi River Journey both have outdoor cues that are not really covered until you get in the building. So just things to keep in mind when it comes to that. The Lion King show can be a little deceiving. It does have some I don't know, it's more like lattice covering on the top of the queue area. It doesn't stop the rain. So you will still get dripped on and wet if you're waiting in that queue when it's raining outside. It's more of a sun covering than it is a rain covering over there. So again, just taking a look, scoping it out, seeing whether or not you think it's an option that will work for you and for what your needs are. Again, if it starts raining, throw those stroller covers on, be ready to go. And if you can get dining or you are hungry at the right time and can go into a dining quick service location to grab some food when it's raining, that's always a good idea as well. So if it starts raining and you're like, well, I could go for a snack, pull up your phone and do your mobile order. So that way you've got a place to go that is inside. Um, but again, be kind to the cast members and make sure that you're not just taking up a bunch of tables just because it's raining when people are trying to eat. So just be aware and be courteous of those around you when it comes to that because you're all experiencing that rain together. So working together to keep everybody safe and dry is your best bet for that. So that is kind of a fast and furious list of where to go in the parks if it does happen to be raining. But now let's talk about at the end of your rainy day, what you need to remember to do to set yourself up for success for the next morning. So you have spent a day in the parks. It rained. You got wet. Your clothes are wet. Things are wet. What do you do next? Well, the first thing is kind of obvious. You need to be sure to completely set everything out to dry, lay it out, use all of the space you have available, use chairs, use hangers in your little closet area in your resort room. Use what you've got to be able to help with that. Also, if you are in a Walt Disney Resort room, chances are good that a lot of the bathrooms in those rooms have these retractable clotheslines that you can use. So, a lot of people will use them for like swimsuits and things like that, but these are really great for drying wet clothes and drying wet ponchos. So, take a look when you get into your room to see whether or not you have them. I know that I think all of the value resorts have those. And I also think a lot of the moderate ones do too. I'm not 100% sure on the deluxe resorts if they have them, but be sure to take a look at that. Also, you can use your hangers in your little closet space to help you dry things as well. But you want to make sure that everything is laid out as much as you possibly can so that you don't get any yucky, gross smells or anything like that when it comes to your wet items. If your room gets morning or afternoon sun, something that you can do if you have wet tennis shoes, that we actually saw this in at our Disney resort on our last trip and had never thought of it before. And it's so smart. If your room gets the sun, prop your shoes up in the windowsill. So we did this with my husband's tennis shoes because I do Crocs and sandals and things like that, but he does like Brooks tennis shoes. So we we typically keep our shades closed to help keep the room cool. So my husband just kind of propped, toe down and, loosened the laces as much as he could, his shoes in the window because our window got afternoon sun. They dried way faster that way. So it sounds very basic and like it would be a no-brainer, but we had never thought of that before at Disney. So using the windowsills to dry, you can also use the hair dryer to dry things, but that's going to take a really long time. So every Disney resort has laundry facilities available. So if you are someone that has a stash of wet clothes, I do not recommend shoes, obviously, in their dryers, and don't put your ponchos in their dryers. But if you've got wet clothes from being in the parks, doing a quick load, even if you just put them in the dryer, if you're not looking to, or you don't need to actually wash the clothes, but throwing them in for a quick cycle in the dryer is a really great option, just to make sure that things are completely dry so you avoid putting any wet clothes in a hamper, in a drawer, back in a suitcase. That is just asking for disaster. So just being sure that you utilize what's available to you to be able to do that. If you are looking for dryers, they're typically by the pools. So most of the time, your laundry facilities are going to be near pools at your resort. So take a look at your resort map or call down to the front desk and ask them where your closest laundry facility is for that. Placing things near your air vent can be a really good idea. Those air vents kick out a lot of air. It's not warm, but it will at least help to be able to get some airflow in circulation to help dry out. Like we typically will put, if our ponchos are not drippy, we will like drape them over the chairs and put them right under where the air vent comes out, just to help make sure that they completely dry overnight, because you don't want to be stuck having a wet poncho still in the morning when you need to repack it to go back into the park for the day. You want to make sure that it's completely dried so you don't have any issues with that. So using the air vent overnight can be a really big help with that. And just being sure to completely empty every pocket of your park bag to ensure that everything dries, because otherwise you're going to have gross pockets inside your bags. It's not going to be a good situation, right? So making sure that you completely empty every pocket of your park bag and that you completely empty out the bottom of your stroller. And I would also suggest, when it comes to your stroller, taking one of the towels from in your room and kind of sopping up any extra water from the seats in your stroller, because the strollers don't dry very quickly. They're not really made of weatherproof material, unfortunately, at least in my experience. So using one of the extra towels to kind of help sop up any extra water to give that a chance to completely dry overnight, and being sure that you don't leave your stroller folded up if you've got space in your room. I know there's not always a ton of space in resort rooms, but if you've got a space where you can keep that stroller up and open out as much as possible, because if you have it folded up, you run the risk of moisture getting caught in where things are folded. And when you go to open it the next day in the morning, when your kids are in their new clean clothes for the day, they're going to end up with a wet behind because they're sitting on part of a stroller that didn't get to dry all the way. So be sure that you are really utilizing every inch of your room, opening up your park bag, opening up your stroller, laying things out, using the hair dryer, using the sun for the next day. Again, it's so important that you have more than one pair of shoes to make sure that if you do need to leave your shoes in the windowsill for a day, that you have another pair of shoes that you can wear. And again, utilizing all of the closet space and hangers to dry clothes if needed as well. So that is kind of a short and sweet rundown of different things that you can do in the Disney parks if you are stuck there on a rainy Disney day. Hopefully, this has been helpful to you and that you got some good ideas and tips and tricks and things maybe you didn't think about for handling the rain at the Disney parks. As always, if you've got comments, questions, you need further guidance, you want help planning or looking into what you want to do at your Disney trip, or you've got suggestions for topics that we can cover here at Mom Street, you can always reach out to us at momstreetusa@gmail.com. And you can find us on several social media platforms. We are at Mom Street USA on all of those. Um, Before we end our time together today, I do want to chat about what is coming up next, because our next podcast episode is, believe it or not, our 100th episode of Mom Street USA. And we are thrilled and so excited to be planning kind of a fun, unique podcast episode for you guys next time. We're going to have some trivia, some just fun little statistics about Mom Street and what we've, been doing for the past 3 years, because it just so happens that this is also our 3-year anniversary of Mom Street. So many fun things to come next week on that episode. But for now, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for listening. We love our Mom Street community. You guys are amazing and so supportive. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. And we will catch you on the next episode of Mom Street USA. Bye, everyone.